Elevators are supposed to make life easier, a simple convenience to get us from one floor to another. But what happens when that short ride becomes a journey into the unknown? For some people, the mundane trip between floors transformed into the longest, most horrifying moment of their lives. Today, we're exploring 3 disturbing, true elevator horror stories. These are real events that prove sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what's waiting for you outside the elevator, it's what's trapped inside with you. So, if you're ready, hit the button, watch the doors close, and hold your breath. Our first story takes us to a downtown apartment complex where a college student named Sarah was living. The building was old, and so was its elevator. It was noisy, slow, and had this long, cracked mirror running across the back wall. It was the kind of elevator you just wanted to get out of as quickly as possible. One night, Sarah was coming home very late, around 2 a.m., after a long shift at her job. She was exhausted, just wanting to get to her apartment and collapse into bed. She stepped into the elevator, the only one there, and the old metal doors slowly groaned shut. As they closed, she glanced at the cracked mirror, and her heart stopped. In the reflection, standing right behind her, was a woman. Her mind raced. She was certain she was alone when she got in. She whipped around, her heart pounding against her ribs, but there was nobody there. The elevator car was empty. When she slowly turned back to the mirror, the reflection of the woman was still there, unmoving, just behind her own reflection. And then it smiled. A wide, unnatural smile. Panic set in. Sarah frantically started jabbing at the buttons, any button, the door open button, her floor, the lobby, anything to make the elevator move or the doors open. But nothing happened. The elevator was dead still, a silent metal box suspended in the dark shaft. The lights inside began to flicker erratically, casting long, dancing shadows. The air grew cold, and she watched in horror as the surface of the mirror began to ripple, like water. That's when she felt it, a cold, damp breath on the back of her neck. It was a feeling of pure, primal fear. Just as she thought she was going to scream, the elevator jolted and the doors slid open with a loud screech. She stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for air, turning back just in time to see the doors closing again. But her reflection was still inside the elevator, staring back at her with empty eyes as the doors sealed shut. Sarah ran to her apartment and never, ever used that elevator again. She took the stairs, no matter how many bags she was carrying or how tired she was. A few months later, she noticed the elevator had been permanently sealed off. When she asked the building manager about it, he just sighed and said that too many people had reported seeing someone else in the mirror. They say mirrors are just reflections of reality, but sometimes they hold on to something more, something that wants to cross over, something that wants out. And sometimes it's not a reflection that's the problem, it's the feeling of being completely and utterly trapped. This brings us to our second story, which happened to a man named David. David worked as a cleaner in a massive, modern office tower downtown. His shift was the late one, the one where the entire building is empty and eerily silent. It was well past midnight, and he was taking the service elevator up to the 7th floor to finish his last round of cleaning for the night. The elevator ascended smoothly for a few floors, then, without any warning, the lights died, plunging him into total darkness. The car gave a violent jolt and came to a dead stop between floors. The silence was absolute. David fumbled for the emergency button, pressing it again and again. Nothing, no ring, no voice, just silence. He pulled out his phone, but of course there was no signal in the metal box. He was trapped. Then he heard it, a faint scraping sound coming from directly above him. It sounded like nails, or maybe something sharper, being dragged slowly across the metal roof of the elevator car. The sound circled the ceiling hatch, slow and deliberate. Whatever was up there was pacing. A wave of cold dread washed over him. He started shouting for help, his voice echoing in the confined space, but the only answer was the scraping sound from above. It stopped. Then, the scraping turned into knocking, a slow, rhythmic knocking on the ceiling hatch. 1, 2, 3 knocks. And then complete silence again. The silence was almost worse. He backed into the corner of the elevator, making himself as small as possible, his eyes glued to the hatch in the ceiling. Hours seemed to pass in that darkness. When rescuers finally managed to pry the doors open about an hour later, they found David crouched in the corner, shaking uncontrollably, unable to speak coherently. He later told them that after the knocking stopped, he heard someone whisper his name from the ceiling vent. When he dared to look up, he saw a hand, pale and thin, reaching down through the small slots of the vent, its fingers twitching. Of course, the maintenance crew searched the entire elevator shaft. They found nothing. No one else was there. They told David it was just stress, exhaustion, maybe even a hallucination brought on by the fear of being trapped. But to this day, something strange happens in that building. Security guards who monitor the cameras late at night report seeing the lights in that specific elevator flickering on and off in rhythmic patterns, as if someone is still up there, tapping from above, waiting for the next passenger. It makes you wonder what really happens when the lights go out. But our final story is perhaps the most unsettling of all, because in this one, the elevator didn't just stop, it went somewhere it wasn't supposed to go. This account comes from a hotel employee who was working the night shift at a large, bustling hotel in Japan. It was around 3 a.m., the so-called witching hour, when the lobby was deserted. Suddenly, the chime of an arriving elevator echoed through the silence. The doors to one of the main elevators slid open on their own. No one had called it, and no one was inside. The employee, a man named Kenji, glanced at the control panel inside the empty car. The light for the button B7 was illuminated. B7, a 7th basement level. This was impossible. The hotel only had 2 basement levels, B1 for parking and B2 for storage. There was no B3, let alone a B7. The night guard, a skeptical older man, walked over to investigate. Thinking it was just an electrical glitch, he cautiously stepped inside the elevator to see if he could reset the panel. The moment his feet touched the floor, the doors slid shut with unnerving speed. Kenji watched in confusion from the front desk. On the floor indicator above the elevator, he saw the light begin to descend. It passed the lobby, B1, B2, and it just kept going down, 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 far below where the building's foundation should have been. The security footage from inside the elevator later confirmed this. It showed the guard looking around, confused, as the elevator descended. Then, for about 3 minutes, the elevator signal was lost completely. It was just gone. Then, as suddenly as it had left, the chime sounded again. The elevator had returned to the lobby. The doors slid open. The guard wasn't there. The elevator was completely empty except for his flashlight lying on the floor, its beam still cutting through the dim light of the lobby. A full investigation was launched. The elevator was inspected from top to bottom by engineers. They confirmed there was no basement level beyond B2. The elevator shaft ended there at a solid concrete foundation. There was no technical explanation for how the elevator could have registered a B7, or where it could have possibly gone. The guard was never seen again. He simply vanished. The hotel sealed that elevator permanently, but even now, years later, night shift employees report hearing it move in the middle of the night, its machinery groaning at 3 a.m., even though it's been completely disconnected from power. So, the next time you step into an elevator, maybe take a moment. Watch the mirror a little more closely. Listen for any strange sounds coming from the ceiling. And always check the buttons, because sometimes the elevator takes you somewhere you were never meant to go. And if the door's open and no one's inside, maybe it's not waiting for you to get in. Maybe it's waiting for something to get out. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed these stories, Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more strange and unsettling tales. Stay safe out there.